Good afternoon, and first of all, I would like to thank Commissioner King and Medler for inviting me to open this conference with them. I commend them for bringing many voices and many actors together on such a pressing topic. And this is so important. And why? Because the European Union and the Transatlantic Alliance were forged with a premise and a promise that working together solves common challenges better than acting alone. It is a premise that has kept us safe, prosperous, and free for over 70 years. And it is a promise that demolished a wall and reunited a continent. Today, both the European Union and NATO face divisions, and indeed, they face existential questions. And some powers who feel threatened by the shining power of democracy, starting with Russia, seek to exacerbate these divisions. One way they do that is by interfering in our democratic processes. According to a report by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russia is responsible for 80% of disinformation activities in Europe. 80%. Over the past 2 years, foreign interference has been detected in at least 10 elections and referendums on both sides of the Atlantic. Voters are subjected to disinformation campaigns. Extremist parties covertly funded, and cyber defenses of political campaigns consistently attacked. Some of the most powerful nations on this planet have been targeted. Nations whose leaders pledges to respond with fire and fury to military attacks, yet they are muted when their own citizens' right to choose their representatives is under assault. And now we see the consequences of our inaction. Other actors are adopting the interference playbook, from China to Venezuela, North Korea to Iran. We must defend our democracy as robustly as we would defend our borders. And this is why I decided to do my part establishing the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity. With former US Secretary of Homeland Security Michael Chertoff, who is the co-chair, and Vice President Joe Biden, or former Vice President Joe Biden, we brought together a group of leaders in politics, tech, business, and media. We are united around one objective, namely to call on governments, civil society, and the tech sector to work together and find solutions to better defend our democracies and prevent the next wave of interference. But there are a number of difficult questions that we must address first. and let me share with you today some of the most pressing ones. Firstly, our resources. Can we honestly say that our budgets are commensurate to the challenge? And my answer is clearly no. I believe we are woefully under-resourced. The European Union spends 1.1 million euros on its East Stratcom facility. In contrast, Russia's so-called troll farm, the Internet Research Agency, spent 10 times this budget. 10 times this budget. The US has allocated $120 million, but hasn't spent a dime of it. So I asked the Commissioner and the participants today, how much is enough? Secondly, cooperation. The recent concerted operation by the Netherlands, the United States, and the UK to name and shame Russian spies showed how powerful cooperation can be in pushing back on Russia. So I ask you, do we have the right structures in place to work together in countering foreign interference? Under Canadian leadership, the G7 is launching a rapid reaction mechanism on interference. Can we ensure this cooperation covers all transatlantic allies and partners? And we must not let some difficult political questions get in the way of cooperation. One of those difficult questions is, of course, Brexit. Security and defense cooperation with the United Kingdom is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Given its expertise in combating interference, we cannot neglect the UK even after March 31st. We also have an increasingly difficult relationship with our closest partner, the United States. There, partisan politics is posing a real challenge. There are 8 bills in Congress related to fight foreign interference, most of them with some bipartisan support, but all are blocked because of partisan politics. The Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity works with members of Congress to show that the issue is not a partisan one. And they all told us one thing, that they are hoping Europe can show leadership on the issue to put pressure on Washington to act. But the next question is, who in the European Union should lead these efforts? The European Commission, the External Action Service, or even a new structure that tackles the issue of foreign interference? And how does the EU support its European partners, such as Moldova and Ukraine, that are Russia's favorite playground for interference? One idea could be for the European Union to appoint a special representative on cyber and disinformation. a special representative who will be able to engage with member states and partners and pull EU resources together to build up resilience. And finally, most importantly, how do we stop focusing on past interference and start preventing future attempts? When we consider conventional defense, governments spend billions in planning 10, 20, 30 years ahead. There will be 20 elections between now and 2020 on both sides of the Atlantic. What is our plan to defend those elections, starting with the European elections next spring? We spent hours debating the ethical and legal responsibilities of social media platforms, and this is indeed an important debate. And some new regulation will likely be needed to enforce more transparency. But we cannot treat technology just as a problem. It's important to also see how technology can be part of the range of solutions. And I hope interventions in the next 2 days can propose some ways forward. My colleague Fabrice Potier will share with you tomorrow some of the work the Transatlantic Commission is doing in this area. And we hope to hear other concrete proposals. And then let me conclude with a final call to strengthen our citizens' resilience. And there is no silver bullet, and indeed no initiative, mobile app or policy which can substitute for civic awareness. Disinformation is often designed to make us believe nothing and trust nobody, not even governments. Our voters should learn to be wary of what they see, to challenge assumed truth, and to check what they are being told. There is such a thing as healthy skepticism, and we should foster it. But we should also deter unhealthy skepticism or even mistrust. In that respect, political leaders have a major responsibility. Politicians must better listen to their electorate grievances, however unpleasant, and they must be honest with their electorate. When politicians say something, they should mean it. When they make a promise, they should keep it. We cannot pretend that election interference is the only reason for growing populism and extremism across the Atlantic Alliance. So-called populist leaders have risen to power because of the malfunctioning of our own systems, the malfunctioning, if you wish, of our global capitalism. But it would be a miscalculation to think that they have risen to power because of a dysfunctional monetary union, income inequality, job insecurity, unsolved political conflicts alone, at least. I think an overshadowing issue is what I would call identity policies. Stemming from unsustainable immigration policies, many people feel that the influx of immigrants challenge our culture, our religion, our way of life. And Russia and others have merely pulled at a thread that we are responsible for creating. So, it wouldn't be sufficient just to defend status quo. We must reform our democracies profoundly. However, our task today is not to discuss the wider issues that have fueled populism, but to ask how we ensure that elections are fought on a level playing field with no foul play. On both sides of the Atlantic, we face the same threat. And today, whatever differences we may have across the Atlantic, we must join our forces to protect our elections. And the urgency is manifest. We must act now to protect our democracy for future generations. Thank you.